Good morning, Kristina. How are you?
Good morning. I'm wonderful. So
I'll
happy to
bet
be
you
here.
are. Yeah, and I'm so happy to have you here. I am very excited about getting to spend some time with you today on a podcast and have my audience, and now your audience get to listen and get to know you like I've gotten to know you. So we have a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and kick off. So here on out, I'm going to call you KP because that's generally what you go by. Your name is Kristina, but we'll call you KP, or I'm going to call you KP. So KP, love you to introduce yourself to the audience, a little bit about yourself, where you are in the world today, and anything else you'd like to kick us off with.
Right on. So yes, great to be here. Kristina Paider is my full name. Most people don't have a lot of time, so it's KP to a lot of people as well.
I like it.
So I'm on the north coast of the Dominican Republic where I spend a lot of time, and I am a screenwriter, a writing coach, and a developmental editor, and as well as a chocolate enthusiast. And occasionally I ride motorcycles and jump into waterfalls.
That's pretty awesome. I have to share the fun fact that you probably knew I was going to share for this podcast. I met KP.
Bring it.
Yeah, well, I met KP a couple of years ago. It was actually more than a couple of years ago now. And we just hit it off right away and found out pretty quickly that she lives, like, how many feet do you live from where I proposed to my wife in 2008? It's like maybe a quarter mile.
Not even. It's a 15-minute walk from my house.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you're in a town called Cabarete, and that's where I proposed to my wife in 2008. And then we got married at a town 30 minutes away, Playa Dorada, it's a beautiful town, but it's not like a major destination for a ton of people. So it was pretty random. And I remember us talking about this. I'm like, hey, have you ever been to the Valero? And you're like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's where we got engaged. And we were like, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a small town. It's like a hideout town.
Yeah, it's like a hideout town. It's like the kite surfing capital of the world. It's stunningly beautiful. And we need to get back soon once this little pandemic ends. So I wanted to start off the episode a little bit different today and actually share how KP and I know each other. So we got connected through the amazing community at Rogue Public Speaking that I've talked about before on the show. And like I said, we hit it off. And KP offered for me to be in one of her amazing courses. It's called the Hollywood Approach. I love movies, and we'll talk more about this. So I'm like, yeah, KP is amazing. Hollywood Approach sounds amazing. And I'm getting into coaching. This all sounds coaching related, so let's do it. I went through that course with you. And then a few months later, we actually connected again. And I actually got a chance to support you in your project that we're going to talk about today, which, congratulations, you have a book that is out in the world. It's out on Amazon, bookstores. And so congratulations. So I feel like I had a very, very small part in helping you get this into the world, but I just want to wish you a very big congratulations. I am not a writer, as most people who know me know. I'm somebody who likes to talk. I do not like to write. So for me, anybody who writes an amazing book, I'm always like, wow, just congratulations. Seriously, KP, it's really cool. And we're going to talk a lot about
Thank you so much.
content.
And you have had a great part, both by being in my masterclass, which allowed me to test the material for the book and see what worked, what resonated, what stood out to people, and then also coaching me as I was writing the book and helping me block and tackle all kinds of different things in life. So it's been super cool being, I don't know what I would say, a friend and a colleague, and just kind of interacting these different ways.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, let's get into it because we got a lot to talk about. So first question for you, KP, what's something that you nerd out about?
I nerd out about, I'm going to give you a dual answer here: cream cheese recipes and neuroscience.
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly what I was expecting.
Good. I hate delivering what people are expecting, but then sometimes it's also like, oh, good, I didn't want to throw you a surprise. Yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like keto or just like a callback to, my roots in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not really the cream cheese capital of the world, but I don't know. There's something about the pandemic that was just like, cream cheese is a reliable product here on the island. And you know what? It makes some fantastic dips. So there's that.
7-layer dip is like a top 5 food for me.
You're right. And then like artichoke dip, and you put in other cheeses, and like crab dip. And it's a very versatile thing.
I love that. Well, my 4-year-old, almost to be 5-year-old daughter, you know, she's a New Yorker, so she likes bagels and cream cheese. And I should take a picture and send it to you about the amount of cream cheese she wants in her bagel. I can never get it right. And when I never get it right, it's never enough. She'd be like, her description of it is, I don't want it flat. I want it with like hills. Like she wants like a big old thing of cream cheese on a bagel.
I feel she and I are kindred spirits. I love where she's going with that. Yeah, I'll do the onion and chives. Mm-hmm.
What about the sweet stuff like strawberry?
I don't like necessarily the strawberry cream. Like I'm a mix my own kind of gal. So like I'll put the layer of cream cheese on a bagel, and we just got somebody back in our town making bagels again.
Amazing.
We've had about a 4-year hiatus from fresh bagels. So this is a very exciting month for us here on the North Coast. But like I will love myself a good, you know, original cream cheese, and then like a local like mango jam or a local cherry jam on top of that. So I don't want somebody pre-mixing my fruit and my cream cheese. I
hear that. If you ever run into KP and you want to go out for a bagel, be sure that she gets a chance to mix her own. That's amazing. I mean, I live in the bagel capital of the world. I guess it's the world. New York City it's the bagel capital of the world, I guess you could say. And yeah, we definitely have the best bagels in New York and New Jersey. I don't know. They say it's the water. I don't know if that's true or not, but they are stunningly delicious.
I've heard that as well. And I wish you luck and good fortune on getting the hills and the terrain, the cream cheese terrain. Like proper for your daughter.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move to something a little less serious than cream cheese and talk about neuroscience. Tell me about what you nerd out about regarding neuroscience.
Well, I really nerd out about the new and newer and emerging research on the market about specifically the neuroscience of story and how story affects your brain. So for years, like in the 60s and 70s, research budgets would go toward how reading affects your brain or how writing affects your brain. And so in the last 10 or so years, maybe a little bit more, there have been more and more studies and bigger investments. Like DARPA made a $38 million investment on the research of story. And so I'm just fascinated with the studies out there. And there's also a lot of anecdotal studies. And I think what's the most fascinating is that they all say the same thing. And even though they say, you know, different things, meaning they don't conflict with each other. They're all like on the same path. Like your brain, you know, when you consume a story in a certain way, your brain, all 7 regions of your brain will light up versus, you know, say if you consume data, it only lights up 2 areas of your brain. And so when you're working in story, when you activate all 7 areas of the brain, like your body produces oxytocin and dopamine, for example. So the binge is legit. So when we're talking about binge-worthy shows and binge-worthy content, it's legit. It's because you're getting a dopamine hit. So it is just like a drug, you know, if it's if it's told right. So anyway, it's stuff like that. Like I can just go on and go in rabbit holes, and I feature some of it. You know, I talk about some of it like in my own work, and I just find it fascinating what we can do if we're tuning into, you know, the right kind of stories, including our own, including the stories we tell ourselves. I think the other thing that's really fascinating in there is that, see, I'm nerding out right now, is just that our subconscious mind works 1,000 times faster than our conscious mind. And there's so much we pick up. Yeah. So, you know, and we only use like a very small percentage of our conscious mind making choices. So that's why habits are so important, and, you know, beliefs and all these things that we are, you know, those of us who are our own work in progress are working on. a lot, but it's just like one of those fascinating things. So if you take that and you really think about that, you're like, oh, what past stories am I thinking about? There's been a lot of talk about, not controlling your thoughts, but like being very mindful of your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then the next step is being mindful of your stories, the stories that you talk about every day, your past stories, your family, your family stories, your fun stories, all of those things. So I just go off the deep end and totally nerd out on these neuroscientific facts. And I think if I'm going to have another career, it's going to be as a neuroscientist. If I go back to school, like if you hear I've gone off the grid again, like I might be trying to get a degree or something in that area.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I didn't know that about you. That's amazing. I think we maybe talked about it briefly, but I didn't know that it was something that you actually like really thought a lot about, because it's actually interesting. As a coach, you would think that coaching, we think a lot about neuroscience, but I actually don't think about it that much. It's more, for me, it's more I'm aware of it. And yes, in coaching, you're always looking we call that, what I'm hearing in that before we move on is, we call that your context, right? So it's the context that you see the world through, and your context are almost always shaped by your past. And in coaching, you're always looking at how do you work with your clients outside their current context, because inside their current context, they're reliable to do the things they know how to do, go to their default behaviors, and likely not see possibility for something outside of it. And again, it's almost always past-based. It's almost like something that's happened in the past or how it's gone. And let me, one more question on this. What about in neuroscience, like the idea that the way it's gone is the way it's going to be? Is that something that our mind kind of like tricks us into thinking as well?
Well, there's this thing called neural pathways. And I just want to make it super clear. I am not currently a neuroscientist. I don't play one on TV, but I have done like a ton of the reading just to understand character when I'm writing a screenplay or anything else, even doing client work. Like it's always great to understand the clients, if I'm doing marketing work, but there's a thing that we have that are called neural pathways. And so as we get, one way to think about it is like, say you live, this is going to be a strange example, but say you live in a rural area and there's, maybe like a wood or a field or something like that between your house and your best friend's house. And as a kid, maybe you start by like, hey, I'm going to ride my bike over to, Sammy's house or whatever. And so you start creating that path. And the more you go back and forth, so say you're back and forth a couple times a day, and like over time, there's just this well-worn path between your house and Sammy's house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of a neural pathway. But if you've only went there once, or maybe you went once a month or twice a year or something like that, it wouldn't be a very well-worn path. So the same is true for I would say, maybe we're using similar terms like for your own story or your own context. If you have a past success story or a fun story about you and Sammy, no matter how close you were, and that's the story you tell over and over and over and over. So maybe in 10 years time or 20 years time, you've told that story 10, 20, 30, 40 times. That's something you believe. And so if it's a fun story about how you and Sammy had a lemonade stand, let's just say, and you made $40 and your kids and you both want a $20 Walkman. I'm totally just making this up. But then like you being like this entrepreneur and having this lemonade stand and getting your Walkman and like you're, this is a great success story for you. But let's say on the flip side, you and Sammy try to have a lemonade stand. Nobody comes. You spill the lemonade on yourselves. So it looks, so just like, and let's just say it's just a disaster and you make like $1 or something. And then you have to pay that $1 back for the materials.
Yeah.
So then maybe you tell that story over and over and over and over and over again. And so then maybe you have different feelings about taking a risk, being an entrepreneur, having an adventure with Sammy. However you tell the story, how it happens, or which story you choose to tell goes into creating these neural pathways.
Yeah.
And so, the more similar stories, like if you're someone who focuses on success stories, or maybe you're able to laugh and say, ha, that was a funny adventure. And then, we went on to, whatever, we sold mud pies and we made $100, whatever,
Yeah.
like whatever the thing is, but it all shapes your context. It shapes
Yep.
who you believe you are in your story. It shapes how you view yourself as the hero or not of your story, and also what's possible for you. So over time, it gets more and more difficult to change the neural pathways if you've been really practicing and, dining out on a particular story that's maybe not so helpful for you.
Yeah. Awesome. We got to move on because we could probably talk about this for the entire time and people be like, wait, I thought this is we're going to learn about KP and as an author, and wait, she's a neuroscience geek? Like, okay, maybe this is a different podcast.
She's just a geek who's not even qualified. What?
Nice. All right. So KP, what's something that's inside of your comfort zone that's likely going to be outside of somebody else's comfort zone?
Oh, editing a pile of chaos. So one of the things I love to do professionally is when people come with me and they're like, I really want to write a book, or I really want to, write a speech or do a TED talk. But I have, all these ideas, and I have 400 pages of a manuscript. Hopefully that is not for the TED talk. Hopefully that's more for the book. And they're like, I need somebody to help me shape it and make sense out of it. And so whether that's actually a full book or sometimes an article or, something on a smaller scale, that is totally my jam and my comfort zone.
Yeah. Nice. And so what's the opposite of that? What's something that's outside your comfort zone that's likely inside of somebody else's?
I would say taxes or learning new technology, usually.
Yeah. What specific technology do you hate? Is there any specific technology that really scares you?
Because I'm aware of it, and I'm aware that that has become a neural pathway, I've really worked on making more effort there. But like a website, I will say that, I'm in the process of redoing my website right now as I get ready for this book launch. And it just, there's a lot of people saying, oh, you can do it, you can get on Squarespace. And I'm just like, you know what? It's just not the natural place I have the headspace. And so I'd so much rather pay somebody who loves that. I mean, there are people who are like, oh, that's like playing for me. And I'm like, oh, blessings to you.
Exactly.
But it's not, and I know that people feel the same way about writing as well. They're like, oh, I can't. And I'm like, no, give it all to me. I'll take it. So yeah, that's it. Technology, learning a system, especially when there's a high stakes attached to it, like your brand, and things working,
small things like your brand, just small things like that, like your brand. Nice. Exactly. So I alluded to this at the top of the hour, top of the episode, but you are also a speaker. You facilitate, lead workshops. You have a lot of experience speaking, and let's pretend I'm the magic podcaster and I have 5 minutes and I've got the whole world's attention. And I give that 5 minutes to you and say, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else, you have 5 minutes to listen to KP. What would you give your speech on KP and why?
Ooh. I think it would be in the intersection of living your best life, going after your wildest dream, and making conscious choices around being your own hero. So that's a lot. I'm probably my own client. I'd come up with 20 pages for that and I'd have to whittle it down to 5. But anyway.
I'd be like, this looks like a quadruple TED talk. Can you make this a 5-minute? This is a 5-minute TED talk, not a series of speaking. It's not a series. It's 5 minutes. But yeah, what inside of that, if you had to boil that down, and I love asking you this question because I know this is actually the work that you do for your clients as well. If you had to boil that all down, distill that into the thing that you'd spend 5 minutes on, what would you want people to walk away with? What's your big idea, in other words?
Oh gosh, it is that you are already your own hero. You've already done the things, and you're already doing the things to be the hero in your own life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the big idea. And then I would, with whatever time I had left after my very long title, it would be explaining, that's why I'm more of a writer and editor than a speaker. But it would be explaining how, because I think people are doing such a great job at life and what they're doing. And it's that lens. It's like you were saying, it's the context. It's the lens. If you adjust it a little bit and dial up the things that are working for you, you can really do whatever you want to do in life. And I believe that.
Very nice. Well, thank you, KP. We're going to take a really brief break, and we'll be right back after this.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, KP, we are back. And so this is the part of the show where you really get the spotlight. I might ask you some questions, but really the floor is yours. Not that it isn't always yours, but this is where you get to share with us, your journey to what led us to here today, the end of January 2021, with you sitting. I don't know if you're actually on the beach. I don't hear any seagulls, but I know you're close to the beach. And if you're not at the beach yet, hopefully you're going to be able to head over there after this podcast, because where I am right now, it's 28 and snow on the ground. But being from Minnesota, I like that. Not as much as the beach, though. Yeah. But like what led you here and led you to writing coaching, getting a book out and all the other stuff you're up to. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Well, yeah, where to start on that? I've always loved writing, and my mother was a teacher for 30 years, an elementary school teacher, and she has such a passion for literacy. So I think she had me on flashcards when I was 3. By the way, not that I'm going to give you a year by year play by play.
At 3, I was on flashcards. At 4, I learned my multiplication table. At 5, I won my first spelling bee.
Exactly. Like, you just keep going. I think your story is better, but it's just,
no, that's not my story.
It's just to say that, yeah, I had a love for language and story and words and vocabulary at a very young age that my mom, my amazing mother, instilled in me. And so I just always loved it. And, I can tell like funny stories of things I did. Like I wrote an SNL skit in 5th grade for an assignment, and it was kind of
cool.
Making a satire of my teacher, which I really didn't think about, because, when you're like that age, you're just sort of like, yeah, whatever. And then I was like, as he was passing assignments back out, I was like, oh, that's when I thought about it. I was like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But he actually gave me an A+ on the assignment. So that was good. But, went on to journalism school, and actually like made it my own major, like a combo of journalism and international relations and PR and all these things. And then just, I got to do a lot of cool things in my early career. And what I didn't realize, so I worked at a TV station for a while. I worked with the Green Bay Packers for a while, with NBC, and went on to do advertising and then marketing, and just kind of pivoting. I had a recruiter, a headhunter that I worked with, who just really believed in her heart and soul that I should be writing movies. And so she stalked me at 27 years old. She stalked me into taking my first screenwriting class. And from that point, I was really hooked. And then, so we know what I do now, as a writing coach and author and screenwriter, and consultant to businesses telling stories and stuff like that. So it's just a world I love. Like it feels like play all the time. I just really love it. So a few years ago, in the middle of this, I had developed panic attacks in the water, and they got so debilitating. They were increasingly debilitating for 10 years. And they got so bad, I couldn't put my single foot in the water without a panic attack. And so it led me to this, crisis point, major plot twist, dark night of the soul, and just had me say, okay, this is no longer me. And this is no longer like, I no longer recognize myself in my own life. So I left LA and decided that the only or I should say, before I left LA, on my way leaving LA, I decided the only logical thing to do would be to buy a one-way ticket to a glamorous Caribbean island and hurl myself off of 27 waterfalls. And so that's what literally all those things led me here to this spot right now today. And so I came to the Dominican Republic to do that as a way to, at that point I was willing to either face cardiac arrest or like interrupt what I, perceived as the motherboard or as the tangled spaghetti, the wires in my head on these panic attacks. So I was like, okay, I'm ready to do that. And so this is what I'm doing. So I like sold all my furniture, sold all my stuff.
Amazing.
It's like, let's just go and see what happens. So 7 years later, here I am in the DR, coming out with a book. And so after that, like it of course led me to think about, why did it take me, it was 13 years. It was like, I led a rescue of a couple of kids in a riptide. 3 years later, I had my first panic attack.
Yeah.
The next 5 years, I couldn't believe they were happening. Then I was like, okay, they're happening, but then I didn't know what to do. And so it was 13 years after the rescue that I bought the ticket here to jump into 27 waterfalls. And 27 waterfalls is a place here on the North Coast that you hike up for 2 hours, and to get back down, you have to jump into each of these falls. And a lot of them are small. Some of them you slide down on your bum and whatever, but there's a big 30-foot jump as well. Yeah. So that did move the needle for me. Yeah. And it also got me, moved the needle. It scrambled enough of those neural pathways that it's like, okay, we're not going foot to water into panic. It scrambled it so I could get back in the water and do more recovery work on my own. So that was great. But it also made me think about, hey, why did it take so long? So when I moved into my oceanfront penthouse here, I was like, hey man, why did it take me so long to get here? And how could I have sped that up? So that's where the intersection came in with, being a story analyst in Hollywood and a screenwriter, and just looking at my own life as like, hey, I need to make a conscious choice about what I'm doing and what the whole rest of my life is going to be like if I don't address this issue. And so out of that just really came, I came up with, as I'm sitting there in Hollywood, analyzing tens of thousands of scenes with, characters going from point A to point B. And it just led me to be like, well, why aren't we all doing this in our real life for things that really matter to us? Because it's actually really, when you do it like in a certain way, it can actually be really fun. I mean, of course, my solution was fun to me, but I think, and I'm for sure not suggesting everyone hurl themselves off a cliff or a thing, but it's like, what's going to get you moving? And if you're at a place in your life where you need to change something, your neural pathways, or, just you need to make a change. Yeah, this can help. So I wanted to create something to help other people too, so that, so that people had a tool to use and to go within themselves if they got stuck. Because I think a lot of times it's not about an external answer. It's about, what do you need to do that's right for you, that you believe in. And, and you can sign up for that journey, you know what I mean? And be on and be committed to that.
Yeah. So I have a question for you about all this.
Yeah.
A writing coach, I kind of know what that is. Like I obviously do coaching, but nobody wants me to coach them on their writing. Let's put it that way. That would be the worst investment you could ever make. And I will be, if somebody says, hey, if somebody said to me, I want to hire you to help me write my book. And I said, do you want help with the content of the book? And they said, yes, I would say, I'm not your person. KP is your person. If they said, I want you to help me get off my butt and go write this book and I'll take care of it, but I need like accountability, that I'm good at. But writing coach, not my thing. What do you spend your days doing? What is for your professional part of your life here, as we're kind of talking about, other than like hanging at the beach, eating bagels and doing your work from there? Like, what do you spend your days doing? And yes, you wrote a book, so obviously you're writing your own book. What do you do for like external clients who hire you?
So I will do a lot of it is meetings. So I will do coaching calls with my private author clients. And so that can be, a combination of either coaching calls or editing for them when they're at a point with their manuscript that it's ready to be reviewed. So Zoom calls, like everybody, right? Coaching through next steps. Where are you stuck? What's the idea? How about working on this chapter next? Be thinking about these, whatever, brainstorming, all the things that go into writing. So sometimes I end up interviewing them and we record it because that gets through like a sticking point of maybe something that they're having a hard time articulating on the page for a certain part. Yeah. Or sometimes it might be brainstorming a certain section of how do we bring this up a level? Is it, does it need research? Does it need more stories? And we kind of talk through those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And then when they're done with a full draft, they'll hand it over. So I'll spend those days reading. I just finished a new manuscript this week. So I spend those days reading, making notes, thinking about the structure and stuff like that. And to do that, actually, when I'm in writing and editing mode, like I also make sure that I'm in really good shape in terms of like I take a walk, I make sure I get my exercise, I make sure I get my sleep, I make sure I get my nutrition, which sounds super basic, but it's very surprising how many people don't
Totally.
or don't really pay attention to that. And so like the thing I'm always saying is like strong body, strong mind. And so I never want I never want to feel sluggish in my brain when I'm approaching that work. So that's all a part of it. But so having a morning routine, then getting to the work, which would be Zoom calls or editing. And then what else is there in that?
Those are the two. Last question for you on this. And then I think you actually have a couple questions for me that's going to relate to all this, but what's your, do you have a specific type of writer that you like to work with? Like, what I don't mean a type of writer, more like the genre that they write in, or like, do you have something that like, if you could design your ideal person who's like, hey, KP, I want to hire you to be my writing coach, what would they be working on? What's your ideal client look like?
I have a range for an ideal client. And I think actually there's probably more of a component about who the person is and why they want to do the project. Because of the way I'm wired. Like I'm really wired as a ride or die person. And I know that like, I can't want the project more. I mean, you know this too from coaching, right? Like, I mean, it seems obvious, but sometimes you start and they're just like, I don't really want to write it. And it's like, okay, well, you want a ghostwriter, and that's not, that's not
exactly.
Because people always say like, I don't really want to actually write. I want to have written something. But that said, so it's a combination of the person and the project. And so project-wise, I do a lot of business and nonfiction related stuff, but I also do action and crime thriller work. So I do have and maybe that's part of the neuroscience, in there, because I just trying to understand the psychology of sometimes and unraveling like a very complex plot is a great challenge to me that I love. But I can't do that like 24/7. Like I can have one of those projects, and then I love like the nonfiction, and the business is almost like a vacation for my brain, because it's it's not so plot twisty and stuff like that. And then on the personal side, like the kind of person, it's like I like to know why somebody is invested in their project, and if they're working for me, it's working with me. If they choose to work with me, it's not a small investment. So
yeah,
it's not for somebody who's like, yeah, maybe I'll try it out. Like, there's a commitment there. So that usually like is the thing itself. But a lot of people that work with me are working with me because their business depends on it, or because they're so passionate about a certain story or topic. Like a couple of years ago, I sketched out a TV series about a real unsolved murder in Washington, D.C. And that was just such a brain twister because it involves some high level entities like the CIA and the Washington Post and the White House and all this stuff. And so it was just like really mind bending, but it also for me can be all consuming. So to have the balance of the two, being the other being business and nonfiction is great. But I really like working with people who are super committed because I'm super committed to them. And so, like I get up, like when I do my walk in the morning, I'm always thinking about I call them my people, my writers. It's like, okay, what's going on with this person's project? What else could maybe help them at this phase that they're in? So those are some of the things. And I don't take a lot of clients. I work only with like 5 author clients at a time so that I can
it's a lot of work.
100%. Yeah. But it's fun. Like, whatever it's fun is
I totally identify with you on I think this is part of the reason we get along so well is like, as a coach, one of the things that and I think I've shared this with you, I'm a leader in a coach training program. And it's present for me because we literally just graduated a cohort of amazing newer coaches in the world this last weekend. We're starting a new cohort here in February. But one of the things we actually train on is you kind of have to be unattached to your client's results, which for me is really hard because there are times when I care a lot more than the client does, but that's also kind of what they pay you for. To be like, hey, this is what you said you wanted. And today you don't think you want that. And there's actually something really interesting we can do. And I'm going to give you maybe this is a pro tip for you. And I don't know if you run into this where people want to quit halfway through or whatever, but when you set the intention for the relationship up front, and I think this applies to any sort of coaching or I think like therapy or any, kind of things like these, like, hey, what do you want me to say to you, KP, when you come and you say you don't want to do this anymore, or you want to quit? Like, what do you actually want me to say to you? Because what's reliable is you are going to run into a block with writing your book, and you're going to get frustrated, and you're going to want to quit. And to remind, like, what do you want me to say to you? For some people, it's like, grow a frickin' pair. For some people, it's like they want love. Some people want words of affirmation. Some people want a kick in the butt. But actually setting that up with your client, like actually say, like, you've coached a lot of people on writing. You know that every single writer is going to run into something where they're like, this sucks, and I don't know what to do next. And like, you're actually going to be the person that gets to stand for them when they don't stand for themselves. And I think that's actually the thing in the coaching industry overall that you're like, well, what do coaches do? And it's like, well, they're like, oh, do you tell people what to do? I'm like, no, you actually stand for your clients when they're not willing to stand for themselves. Sometimes, like, that's one of the roles that we play. And I'm putting like your style of coaching this too, is just standing for people and standing for what they say they want for their greatness when they don't see it for themselves. Mm-hmm. We get to stand outside of that and remind them. And with that, this is the part of the show I've been calling it the AJA, which is super cheesy. It's the Ask Jason Anything. It's not an AMA, it's an AJA. So KP, I think you have a couple of questions for me, or at least one. What would you like to ask me that I can answer for you and the audience?
Well, I think that you have done some fantastic work, and in my masterclass that I got to witness, which was a couple years ago now, while
I can't even believe that.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Years is crazy. That is crazy.
It was 2 years ago because it was 2019. It was like around this time. I think I started it in February.
I believe that was the year where you didn't have to wear a mask and there wasn't a global pandemic. It feels kind of familiar, but I'm not even sure at this point.
Yeah, that's why it feels like we were in high school too. It just feels like so far away.
Totally.
And so you did that. And we've talked about this a little bit from time to time. You did that. Yeah. You did my class at the same time you were doing some coaching training.
Yes.
And in my class, we go deep into your own character DNA and what drives you. And we also go into, like, you get to pick some of your own past success stories, and we analyze those the same way that we analyze a Hollywood movie. We just kind of deconstruct them a little bit, and then we, I put you did several exercises about me probing and asking questions and stuff like that. And I'm wondering now, 2 years later, after assessing your success stories and your own character, your character DNA, we talked about your strengths and your flawsomeness and your superpowers.
Yeah.
What from those exercises do you remember now? Like, because there's we're talking about how story like affects oxytocin and dopamine.
Yeah.
It also like actually makes you remember more, like it affects your memory when their stories told a certain way. And so I'm wondering just if you can share what stands out to you and what just anything. So it's kind of an open question, like what stands out to you as a lesson, or just like, hey, this surprised me that I learned, I didn't realize this thing about myself when I did this work.
Yeah. The thing, and I love this question because, as you know, I'm a big film person. So this year's been tough for me. One of my, like, just the brief aside, I'm a complete extrovert. Anybody who knows me is like, I'm like all the way out on the Myers-Briggs. I'm like an E. I love people. I think that's pretty obvious by now, the people who listen to this podcast or know me. One of my favorite things to do in the world is to go to movies by myself. So it's actually like one of the few things that I'm like, oh, I love doing that by myself. So I'm a huge film person. So the thing, and a little bit of an aside, it's a little bit about me, but I think it relates. And if it doesn't, oh, well, it's my show. The thing that really stands out to me is the idea of who are the protagonists in your life and who are the antagonists. And I don't think before that I ever really thought about it in that way. And, I know the hero's journey. I've learned about it, through like high school and college, but it's also, I think before doing the work through masterclass, I never really related to myself in that way. And for me, it was about like, hey, who are the protagonists in my life? Who are like, let's say that let's use, what I think is the biggest box office movie of all time now. I believe Marvel's Endgame or Avengers Endgame, I think is, if it's not, it's like one of the top three. So let's say that I love Tony Stark. I love Iron Man because he's like, I like how he's snarky and he's actually not a superhero other than has a ton of money and is good with technology, which I'm good at technology, don't have the money that he has, but I would like to be him someday. And I also think it'd be cool to fly around in a suit. But like, who are my Avengers? Like, who are the Avengers in my life? Right? Like who's my Hulk? Who's my Spider-Man? Who's my Doctor Strange? Like, who are the people that I know when it comes to the big things that I'm up to that are going to like be by my side? And then who's my Thanos? If you've seen these movies, he's the bad guy who basically just like half the humans disappear. And I think for me, like thinking about, I've always had a pretty good handle on the protagonists in my life, or I thought I did. But there's actually when I went through this exercise, there was actually a lot more that I didn't realize. And the thing that I was never really present to, or who are my antagonists in my life. And the thing that really struck me is, no surprise, the biggest antagonist in my life is myself. And then thinking about this over the last year, who else has been an antagonist? When I say an antagonist, it's like the thing it's been the barrier to me achieving what I want. Because if you remember, I don't know if you remember this or if you've looked back at this, I have one of my outputs was to build a successful coaching practice. Like that was actually the main output. That like was my hero's journey. And I was just starting the process then, like literally just starting.
Yes, I totally remember that.
And I'm on the way. Like it's not final. Like, I mean, as a solopreneur, we're always in process. We're always building. We're always trying to scale and grow our businesses. But for me, like the antagonists over the last year have been myself. Definitely COVID, because I'm a big in-person person. And when COVID hit last March in New York City specifically, all the things that I was doing to generate a lot of business went away, like in-person networking and just doing a lot of those sort of things. And then I think the big antagonist for me is is just like our country it's kind of funny, like the state of the United States over this last year, like politically, BLM, all the stuff that happened over the last year. It's actually been an antagonist in terms of, and yes, we could name some antagonists. I'm not going to do that here because we don't get into politics, but like more like the noise is the antagonist. But for my business specifically, it's actually a bit of a protagonist because people need people like Jason and Kristina right now. Like my business actually is really taken off because people are like, oh, you know what? I've been sitting around just, kind of like doing my thing, like working and haven't really been happy. And suddenly I'm at home with my kids, or I realize that I'm actually really passionate about social justice and I haven't been doing anything. And like, I'm not really sure where to go next. Like, hey, let's go find a coach to do that. Or, I mean, I would be shocked if you haven't picked up some clients that are like, I used to commute to the office and now I'm at home and I've always wanted to write a book. It seems like this would be a good time to start that. Like, I'd be shocked if you don't have people that are, doing that. So again, to answer long-winded answer to your question is, for me, it's like the ideas of protagonist and antagonist, and then who they are in your life. Cause you had us actually take a look at that. And it's not something I think most of us think about. Like, we know people we generally don't like, but I'm not like, that's an antagonist from the story of my life. And we're like, that person annoys me.
Yeah. Well, and then there's we talked about what to do about them, what there is to do about them. Yes. And in the book, I think what you're talking about is the protagonist, the language you use is what I use in the book as allies. And so, right. Like it's your other Avengers, it's your Ocean's 8 or your Ocean's 11, 12 or 13. It's your squad. And that was one of the things that I learned in masterclass as well, from everyone. Like, and so this is one of the things I love doing, is seeing the similarities across so many people, doing that exercise to think through who your allies have been through your different success stories in your life. And almost every single person has this realization. You can see it on their face, literally, when they're doing it. They're like, oh my God, like I didn't realize, and there's always there's often, I shouldn't say always, but there's often a person or two or three like in your life, or a character. It might be an archetype, like it might be a mentor figure, or it might be like, what we would call in Hollywood a window character, which would be like your friend. It would be like your Sammy with the lemonade stand or whatever. It's like the person next to you. And maybe you always have a buddy, or maybe it's always your wife or girlfriend, or maybe it's historically been like a parental figure or a grandparent figure. But for most people, they find these patterns. And so when you see it, because we're not doing like an external test where you have a multiple choice. There are no multiple choice questions in my program, but it's really like you analyzing your own story. And so I find that when what I hear, what I see over and over is like the allies are a force multiplier. Because once you tune into like, hey, the other thing too, I think that people naturally realize is, hey, I'm not accomplishing any of these things all by myself. Like, not really. Right. Like when you break down your goal, it's like, oh, hey, I didn't just get up one day and write a book all by myself. And you didn't just get up one day and be like, oh, I'm just going to switch over to from this job to like having my own business. It's like we had people supporting us. And so I think it's really exciting and also empowering, and so telling, like if even if that alone, if anyone listening gets that alone out of this, that the neural pathway to, we don't do it alone. We have our allies. And if you think of it in a fun way, because I also, on the flip side of that, I hear a lot of people saying like, well, I don't want to ask anybody for help. Like, I just want to do it alone. I think it's cheating. Like I had one student who was like, cheating. I think it's cheating to like have she was writing some like her own course, and she I forgot what kind of help she wanted. I can't remember if it was like an editor or but it doesn't even matter. But she just what came up for her was she's like, I feel like I'm cheating if I hire somebody to help me. And I'm like, if I felt like I was cheating to hire somebody to build my website, like I'd have
KP, did you do this website yourself? If you didn't, then you're cheating.
I'd have to stop and sell coconuts on the beach, man.
There you go.
But I think that's a really exciting, and like any one of those things can be like a huge revelation. And the same thing with antagonists. I hear that a lot too. So follow-up question. Do I get a follow-up question or should we move on to? Well,
yeah, let's take another 5 on this because I love this topic. And again, it's my show. It's the power of being behind the desk of the almighty host. Boom. But I wanted to like share something else that was really fascinating for me is now working for myself for the last, it's coming on 2 years. I've actually started to have some things, and I think in writing they call them the ex machina, which I think is like a plot device that is like kind of comes out of nowhere to actually help you, and they're actually kind of can be cheap, right? Like it's like this hero, there's no way they're going to be able to save the girl, and then like somehow the thing happens. Like that's called a plot device, isn't it?
Yes, that's called like a plot device. If there's sort of like something that is.
You're like,
in the really negative way, we'd say forced. Yeah, a little too easy.
Right.
But the Deus, I think the other thing you're referring to too is the Deus ex machina, which
Deus
is
ex machina. Yeah, exactly. It was like God is in the machine, or something. God is in the machine.
Yeah, it's like a force of nature. So it's like,
right.
All of a sudden, there is a hurricane that starts right now in the middle of this podcast. It changes the course of the pod. It's that kind of, it can be that kind of thing, or it doesn't have to be just a nature thing, but just something that is really, cuts through whatever the current path is.
Got it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and the reason I bring this up is, I got an email yesterday from somebody that I hadn't talked to in almost 2 years. Hadn't even thought about this person, and they have a business opportunity for me that can like completely like have the beginning of my year go tremendously well. And I like, to me, that's like almost like a plot device, but it's like in a good way, because it's again, like working for myself, like realizing that like when you just show up for people and you just keep doing the work that like these, I'm just going to call it a plot device because we're talking about Hollywood, that like these plot devices start to show up in your life when you least expect them. Like I had no idea. And all of a sudden I see the email, I'm like, oh, I know that name. And I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty awesome that you remember me from 2 years ago. And you're like, do I have any capacity for another engagement? And I'm like, I actually do have capacity for an engagement right now. So we're talking at 3:00 today. I'm like, that is really cool. So it's like also the thing, and this wasn't about the masterclass, but learning is like, it's not all just on you as the hero and you're as a protagonist or your allies. There's also like the force of good, the karma, universe, spirituality, whatever that is. Like there's actually like the forward momentum and inertia that happens when you just show up as a protagonist in your own story.
Yeah, absolutely. That happens. Like you have your action plan, you're working. I mean, and I know you have yours and you've been, you're working on it. You're putting yourself out there, like hopefully most, if not every person in business. Right. And just like you said, showing up, so being there for your audience, doing your thing. And it's amazing the kind of things that can fall in your lap or have, the good plot twists in life. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to give you, let's put me and you on a counter here, because I want to ask you a couple more questions before we wrap up today. We have about 15 minutes left. So you have another question for me. Can we do it in 3 minutes?
Sure.
Let's do it.
The follow-up was just, in what way have you, if you're willing to answer, in what way have you observed that you are your own? Because we observe, we don't judge in the Hollywood approach. I hope you remember.
I don't remember that, but that makes sense.
Oh, maybe I started hammering that after our first class. But it's all about observing, because that's where the information is. The judging is something else. So in what ways have you mentioned that you are your own antagonist, like in pursuit of growing and developing this new business? And I'm just wondering if you'd be willing to share in what way or ways, or name a way you have observed yourself being your own antagonist.
I totally will share this.
And
this
by
is
the way,
not
we all do it.
Yeah, this is not the Jason is the perfect person show. This is Jason as a human being with very complex things like all of us have. So how am I an antagonist for myself? Get distracted easily, which I guess is, and this is an observation and an assessment, but get distracted easily. Letting external forces derail me from what I'm actually committed to, which I think is a very natural human thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the world through, and this is the thing my first coach I ever hired, like, really worked with me on, because I've like seen the world as black and white, right or wrong, ones and zeros. Because I used to be a lot more binary. And I think that's, you call it like this really self-sabotaging behavior. Like, oh, you're either going to work with this person, and if you don't work with this person, then you've lost. Like, well, no, but what happens when the next client comes along who wants to pay you double what this other client was going to pay you? So, not putting boundaries in place, like thinking I can do it all because I'm Tony Stark and I've got my Jarvis, my artificial intelligence with me, which, by the way, total aside, would be like my dream if I could wake up and have a Jarvis to be like, just do everything for me. Like, if I could have a computer to tell me to do everything for me and I just got to be like, hang out and be rich and like snarky, that would be my dream. But yeah,
very
like,
good.
yeah, the idea of like not setting proper boundaries with, and this goes into like home life and work life as well, like not like making decisions in the moment, not from like what I'm actually committed to, but what feels like I quote unquote need to do in the moment, which I'm somebody who likes to kind of do things quickly. And if you look at the list of things I do quickly, you're like, some of those things don't need to be done quickly. They're like, this is a good one. Have you ever done the Stephen Covey's 7 Habits? And you have
I know that
have you ever seen the 4 quadrants?
Read it. Yeah. Oh, but I know the 4 quadrants. Yes. Where I must be like you if I'm reading into what you're saying, like everything is urgent and important. Everything is in the 1 quadrant.
Yeah. Like I've really done a pretty good job in my life of getting rid of the not urgent, not important things. It's easier to do when you don't work for somebody else, for sure. When you work for people, you're like, that doesn't matter what my boss wants, so I got to do it. But yeah, like treating everything as like urgent and important. Like, well, is it really? Like, is getting back on this email really as important it is to like go out and spend an hour calling potential clients? So yeah, like normal stuff here, probably no surprise. Just normal human stuff. And I think the last thing is antagonist for myself is when I run into the self-doubt that what I'm doing is what I'm meant to do. And I say this as, I know you worked in corporate for a long time. I worked in corporate for almost 20 years. So it's like, it's a lot easier to go and get a job and make money when they pay you a paycheck every 2 weeks and say, here's your computer and your job, go do it. And here's the 1,000 marketers behind you. They're going to help you do this versus like, yeah. I run my own business. Like I have some help with like a VA and stuff, but like this is on me. And like, there's days where it's like, oh yeah, like it would be so much easier to not do all this. Be easier, but like, do I want to take the easy path? And obviously the answer is no, because we're sitting on a podcast Wednesday at 12:20, which means we both work for ourselves, don't have anybody telling us what else we need to do with our time. But I think those are the main things that pop up. That's a great question. And by the way, if you can, for those listening, you can tell I had no idea that was coming. So thank you, KP. That's a really good question.
Thank you. Thanks for being willing to answer it. And by the way, for what it's worth, like I think a lot of what you've said is so universal for so many people. And so I just applaud you for being able to recognize that.
Yeah.
Part of the whole thing that, it is work in progress. Like we're all on a journey. It's all work in progress. And, I'm sure in a lot of the work you do too, it's, information is power, not to be super cliche, but it really is.
Right.
I mean, even just talking through that, you're probably like, oh, okay. Like, I don't know, for me, something happens each time. And it's always magical to see somebody just identify with just one distinction, right? Because one distinction, if we change our trajectory by like 1 little %, we can end up in a different place sometimes. Easier or faster or more fun, having more fun while we're doing it. So that's the whole point.
Yep. All right. I think I did it in 4 minutes, so not bad. That's pretty good for me. All right, KP. Next question for you. What are you passionate about?
I'm passionate about the art and science of living your best life, living my best life, and helping other people engineer and write their script for their best life too.
Mm. You said the art and the science. Are you saying that you don't have a 28-step process on how to live your best life?
No, I don't. And you know what? In fact, I love that question because I think so often people have like, this is the 8 steps and this is the 12 steps and the things. And I think that's great and it serves its purpose. But what makes my jam and my approach different is that I'm not, there's no minimum or maximum viable requirement. And sometimes, I'm sure as you well know, sometimes it can be as straightforward as sitting down and just focusing and hammering out your SMART goal. And I've literally seen people do that. I've seen people do that and then they go off and then I don't hear from them. And then I get like a message, like, whatever, a period of time later. And it's like, oh, sorry, you didn't hear from me. I rented a room and now I'm playing, I'm playing the drums and I've got rehearsal space and I'm auditioning and I do this stuff. And it's like, and their goal was to, be a musician again or something like that. And so sometimes it's as straightforward as, having a conversation and have somebody challenge you with questions, that being you or that being me or that being, whoever you're doing that with. So there's no 28 steps, but there's
I find all the 28 steps or the 14 ways to blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. That's useful for lead magnets to get people to click on something, but that's about it. I have a joke that I do with a lot of my clients. Will be like, well, today I want I think I want to talk about my procrastination. I want some tips and tricks on procrastination. I'm like, great. Go to Google and Google tips on procrastination. And there's a million things you can download, but there's a reason you're here with me is because if it was that easy, you would just go and download something or read a book. Just like read the one book about procrastination and you never have to think about it again. But there's always deeper work to do than just the reading of it or like the steps.
Exactly. And I think from an editorial standpoint, I was in the newsroom in those days when that was the big new thing to do, was come up with an odd number of your tips or your thing to get the thing. I'm not kidding. I mean, that's like 90s, stuff. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I'm saying now, since it worked for the original people who made that popular, now it's like, I don't know, maybe some people are a little bit tired of that. Maybe they're looking for a little more flexibility during the,
Absolutely. And I before we move on to the next question, I want to relate this back to what we were talking about earlier today around the work that you do and the Hollywood approach is like, in the movies, it's never a science. It's always like, there's always a lot of art that goes into the hero's journey. And that's actually the same philosophy that you're now bringing into the book that you have coming and also the other things that you're up to. And I know the things that you train on in workshops, it's all about the combination of the art and the science without having to do it a certain way. Yeah, as long as the result is what you want.
It's like you do the things to do, you throw it out there. And then at that point, it kind of becomes an improv free-for-all in real time, in real life. I mean,
my
that's
favorite.
The truth. There you go. Good.
Awesome, KP. All right. So you've talked a lot about your journey and a lot of amazing stuff that you've done. What's the thing, if you had to put a pin on it for just today, what's the thing that you're most proud of?
I think it is saying yes to myself and to saying yes to the pursuit of my water recovery journey, which meant selling all of my worldly possessions, buying a one-way ticket, and committing to the journey until I was satisfied. That if I should face a situation again where someone or more than someone, some two or some group is in trouble in the water, that I knew I did everything I could to be the person again to provide help in that situation. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's awesome. All right. You ready for the vulnerability question?
Oh God. Sure. That was very Midwest, wasn't it? Oh God.
Oh
yes.
gosh. Oh, darn it. What are you going to ask me, Jason? Oh, geez.
Oh, hey.
And no, we're not going to ask you about your romantic life. That's not what this is about. I could, if you want me to. As you can all tell, I didn't prep KP for this part, so you never know what I'm going to come up with. But actually, what I want to ask you about is, what is something that you have identified, or here in the moment again, that you are afraid that might actually be true about you?
Of course, I just come up with a funny answer, but
Great.
Since we brought up the Midwest, it's a funny answer. And so I'm going to throw it out there. And then maybe as I'm speaking, I don't know if that's a real answer or not, but while I was home in Wisconsin during the election of 2020, I was very sick. I got poisoned. I was exposed to some poison. I was poisoned. I'm fine now. Everything's fine.
Wow.
But I didn't know what it was at the time. And I had all the symptoms of COVID, believe it or not, like exhaustion, just fatigue. I could barely do anything. After like 2 p.m. in the afternoon, like I couldn't lift my own head up. Like I had to be sitting in a chair with a headrest. So just to like sort of say where I'm at. And there was like this voice in me still that's like, well, come on, you can at least go to, walk to my parents' mailbox, which is not very far, maybe 400 meters or something like that. Yeah. And in my head, I was just kind of like, don't be so lazy. Like we all have these voices, right? Like, don't be lazy, just go do it. And there was not all the love or money in the world or Amazon packages in the world that I couldn't do it. And so I don't know if I really am afraid it's true that I'm lazy. I mean, I guess as I say that, I'm like, that's ridiculous. I've worked hard and smart my whole life, long hours. So it's not, I guess that's not really true, or that's not really what I think, because I know I'm not, right. So I guess that was just sort of the funny answer. Like, I'm afraid I'm lazy, but like I did, we all have those thoughts, right? Like, we're like, come on, man, whatever the thing is that, it's not true. Like if you think about it for a second, your logic is like, that is not true. And here are the reasons that's not true.
Right. So you know what you just did here?
What did I do? What did I do now?
You proactively answered the question that for the podcast, I don't generally go to the second part of this, but this is again, like, can be a coaching thing. It's actually kind of more of a therapy thing. If you think about it, it's like, what are you afraid might be true about you? It's usually something about your past. What you actually proactively did without any coaxing is you explained the thing that you do to compensate for the fear, which is to work really hard. So I'm afraid it might be, and again, like a lot of these things are very, like, they're just like sometimes the story we have. So, and the reason I say this is, and maybe I'm relating this to myself, I also identify with that. So for a lot of people, like, I'm afraid I might actually be lazy. So how do I prove to myself and to the world that I am not lazy? And I bust my ass and I burn myself out and all these things to prove to everybody out there that I could not be possibly, but if you looked at me, there's no way you would ever say I'm lazy. So if you think about like this question and relating this question to everybody I ask this question to, I can almost always relate what they say to the way they show up in the world is the opposite of the thing that they're afraid of. So for people that are like, I'm afraid of, it's like, I'm afraid that I'm afraid that people will relate to me as fragile. Those are usually the people that show up very like, those are tough people who don't show any emotion. I'm afraid that I'm not disciplined. And then a lot of times those are the people that have like all sorts of strategies and structures for keeping discipline in their life. And again, like, I think this is what we do as humans, right? We have these things we think about ourselves, and then we are constantly trying to prove ourselves in the world wrong. Most people, not everybody, but again, this is more of a therapy thing, but through the lens of coaching, looking at somebody like, and I look at like like I coach a lot of entrepreneurs, like people like, oh, I burn the midnight oil. I burn myself up. I'm tired. I'm not taking care of myself. What is it you're trying to prove that has you believe that this is actually not true about you? And usually it's that, well, I'm actually not as dedicated. I'm not as disciplined. I'm not as I might just be lazy. And
that's so interesting. It's such a fascinating insight, because as I think back, there was like many, this was many years ago now, like 15 years ago, when I was also very ill. I like a different thing, different times. I don't want to talk about all my illnesses, but it was like that period. And I felt really vulnerable about not doing enough or not living enough. And so at that time, I'd work around the clock. And then I was also at school. I was able to do a UCLA screenwriting coursework online. So I do that to like 11 o'clock. And, and when you're sick, that's when you need your rest.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing, but it's so interesting. And I think too, it's also interesting that if you are hearing that from a lot of people, I wonder if that's something like, because I feel like I'd give a different example if you asked me to write it.
Well, I'm not surprised by that
exercise, because I would think about it a second and be like, no, that's not what I really think. So now you'll have me thinking for the next while, what am I really, because we do have those sort of surface answers, or maybe we go to comedy to avoid really answering that. So now I'm going to be thinking about this whole process. Fascinating.
If I can leave my guests to think about things and be like, that dude sucks because he's got me thinking about something new, I accomplished my goal. Let me give you another example before we move on here. A lot of people, their answer is, I believe that I'm unlovable. So then what are the things you're willing to do to prove that you're lovable? And usually the thing that people will do is they will become pushovers or people pleasers. Speaking as a people pleaser, a recovering people pleaser, or like, I'm not likable, I'm not lovable. So what am I going to do? I'm going to prove to everybody how likable and lovable I am by like being a great support system. And I say this to you specifically because we've talked about this, the culture that we grew up in, like that is kind of the culture of like, you don't need anything for yours. I don't need, hey, nothing for any of you to see over here. I'm good, but I'm going to show up for you all day long. So yeah,
I'm going to say yes to everything you need, and I'm not going to, and then I'll just push everything I need aside. That's a common thing for people pleasers. Yeah. In that way.
Absolutely. All right. Got a couple more questions for you if you've got a couple more minutes for us.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. So KP, what's your general philosophy on life? And let's keep it brief. We're not writing a long textbook. It's more like you wake up in the morning, you look out, see the beach, maybe take a swim. What's your general philosophy on life that you like to wake up with every day? And not every day, but what's your general philosophy? In other words, how do you see the world?
Well, first of all, I'm going to put away my dissertation, which I did pull out so that I could read all 387 pages, which is even longer than my book. And I'll just say, I wake up.
We'll put the dissertation in the show notes. How about that?
Okay, great. That'll be a very fun scroll for everyone.
Oh boy. Yes.
So I think general philosophy and outlook is like, it's like, hell yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. I love it. Hell yeah, let's do this. That's a great philosophy. I'm going to leave that right there because I don't have any questions. That makes a ton of sense to me. All right. So you're a writing coach, you're a published author, you're a speaker, you're a facilitator, you're a badass swimmer. How can all the people who listen to this episode connect with you and find you? Where can they get in touch with you?
They can come right on over to my brand new website, KristinaPaider.com. Kristina with a K and an A. Paider is Paider, which I'm sure you will spell correctly in your show notes. And it's also spelled correctly in my dissertation. So if you
in the dissertation,
enough, you'll be able to find it.
Great website. From the website, I have no doubt people can connect with you on LinkedIn, Instagram, like wherever, Facebook, TikTok, dancing
all
videos,
the places and all the things.
All the places.
Yeah.
I want to share with the audience one thing about KP that I just adore. So you'd mentioned you live in Cabarete, Dominican Republic, and I have a friend who went down there in January, and I emailed you and said, hey, I have a friend and his girlfriend coming down. Would you be willing to connect with them? And I think you wrote me back, and I don't know, it wasn't that long. You're like, oh, hell yes. You're like, yes, please. That's not the response everybody will give you when you come with an email like that. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you're actually going to get together with them for a socially distanced beach meal sometime very soon before they leave.
Absolutely. Yes, actually this evening. And I can't believe I can't believe that wouldn't be anyone's answer of a friend. Actually, I can, but then I would really question if they were really from the Midwest or not.
Right.
That's all.
Exactly.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
Exactly. All right, KP. So last thing, leave us with some beautiful written, spoken, all the good stuff, words of wisdom. have it fit on a Post-it note or an Instagram post? The graphic part of the Instagram post. What do you got for us?
You are already doing so many of the right things.
I love that. I love that. Oh man, that's so good because I think most people have such a bias for all the things they're doing wrong.
We do. Our brain is actually wired that way. See, neuroscience geek out.
There
moment.
it is.
You let me slip one in. Yeah.
That's called a callback.
Our brains are wired, set up in payoff also for the negative in some ways. And if I put all my little neuroscience nuggets together, we're wired for the negative, and our subconscious rules way most of the show. And so there's ways that we can work, with how we're wired to influence our experience and have a better experience. So that's why I say you are already doing so many of the right things. Get to know and get to figure out what those are and recognize those and think about those. And that alone can be a very positive thing to do.
Yeah. Beautiful, KP. Well, I want to thank you for being on today. I want to congratulate you on your book, and everybody check it out. I cannot wait to get a copy myself and read it because, as we talked about, I'm a big film person. I know you have a lot of references to Hollywood stuff in there, so it's definitely speaking my language. And congratulations on that, and congratulations on all the amazing stuff you're up to, and congratulations on the waterfalls. And hopefully someday, when we're not all wearing masks, we can get, my wife and I, and now our 2 children, can get down to Cabarete and we can all hang out and do some waterfall stuff together. That would be delightful.
That would be amazing. And thank you
it's so on the
much
very
for
short
having
list.
me.
Yeah, thank you so much, KP.
This has been a blast. Thank you.
Awesome. Catch you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.